I mean, in terms of South American art, there was another painting that we wanted to include, but it was impossible to get a response from the Jesuit church where it's located, so it got taken out. So the only image that we have from South America, so we're looking at Peru now, down in South America. We're specifically looking, let's see, where are we? There's Cusco and Lima, okay, and a little bit south where the lake is located. We find these kinds of images, okay? This is known as the Master of Calamarca. Okay, so we don't know the precise identity of the artist, but given sort of the formal characteristics, it's related to the work produced by artists in this area. La Paz School, today what's like La Paz, Bolivia, a little further south of Lima and Cusco. The angel with Arquebus, Asiel Timorde, which is Latin for means Asiel fears God, is one of the archangels from I think it's from the Book of Enoch. From the Judaic tradition, 17th century, all on canvas gold. And clearly the artist is looking at the European tradition of representations of archangels, but then he does something different with them. This is what makes it really unique and local. One of the things I want to add as I continue talking about this, that one of the things that's different about colonial painting in South America, especially this region of South America and Peru, we see a lot of gold added to the surface of painting. You know, there's a distinction. We don't see the same kind of thing in New Spain. In South America, we see not only like gold leaf applied to the surface of painting, but actually we see gold objects. Like there are virgin paintings that have actual gold crowns attached to the surface. Before Rauschenberg, we have combine paintings. You know, they attach things to the surface. And one of the suggestions has been that this is like an indigenous aesthetic, because we find that before the Spanish arrived to Peru, there seems to have been this sort of perception of sacredness in reflections. So we find tunics made out of gold that reflect light, pools of water that reflect light. So this idea of reflected light seems to be associated with sacredness or the divine to indigenous individuals. And this interest in reflective surfaces seems to kind of survive in this context, since we know that most of these artists were native or possibly mestizo. You know, so this interest in reflective surfaces and the use of gold it has been associated by some scholars to that indigenous aesthetic. The probable sources, again, apocryphal, angels from the Book of Enoch, pre-Hispanic winged warriors. It's also been suggested that this might have another indigenous kind of idea circulating, that of these winged kind of warriors or guardians. We know that like the rifle and the poses come from these military illustrations from Jacob de Gain's Exercise in Arms. We found the sources and we see the exact illustrations some of these paintings were based on. And then the clothing is drawn from contemporary noble indigenous dress. This is how noble natives in the 17th and 18th century dressed. Okay, so these are the main sources for this type of painting. Yeah, kind of. So here's an example of one of these archangels. This is Peter Paul Rubens, Lucifer and the Rebellious Angels, 1622. You know, very militaristic with armor and weapons. Okay, so there's already a European tradition. The church had, I guess they outlawed the representation of these kinds of angels, but the artists in Peru ignored that and continued to produce them, which is an interesting kind of conflict there or deviation. Here's one of the illustrations from that Degain manual, kind of showing a soldier in uniform holding the rifle. This was clearly one of the models. This is what I was talking about, how artists in the colonial context kind of mixed and matched things freely in a very creative way, in ways that you couldn't see in Europe in most cases. And the clothing is very complicated. This is a diagram I found, kind of identifying each item of clothing. And this is the kind of clothing that noble indigenous people wore during the colonial period. So everything's identified. You know, the jacket, the sleeves, the undercoat, the stockings, the pants, the shoes, the ribbons.